Yeah.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. Happy Thanksgiving. I realize for those of you who are listening in a country outside the United States, it's just, Thursday. But here in the States, it's Thanksgiving. And that means it's a day of 3 timeless traditions. Eating a big meal, ideally with roast turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, that sort of thing. Watching American professional football games, at least one of which has to include the Detroit Lions. I think that's a federal law, actually. And spending time with family. Often members of your family that you don't see that often. That's the kind of thing that, let's face it, that can go either way. Some people are very excited to see family members they haven't seen in a long time. For others, it's just something, it's just something to get through. As I said on last week's show, this is why I wanted to release an episode a day earlier than usual, so that if you, for any reason, need to take a break from your Thanksgiving and you want a little company as you take a walk or go for a drive just to clear your head, well, I wanted to be there for you. So I'm going to share a couple of behind-the-scenes things from the world of Money Unplugged, and hopefully it helps distract you and recharge your mental batteries so you can get back into the fray in a better state of mind. And I know not everyone is going to listen to this on Thanksgiving Day, so hopefully the broader theme of giving thanks will resonate whenever you listen to this. Because, let's face it, we all have moments when we are more grateful than usual for the people in our lives and the gifts that we've been given. Sometimes that's because of the calendar. There are annual things like New Year's Eve, your birthday. Those are times when it's natural to be reflective about the year just finished and the year ahead. And I don't know about you, but those moments for me tend to involve things like personal resolve and gratitude. So back in September, I got an email from a listener. info@moneyunpluggedpod.com. That's the email address if you ever want to ask a question or share your thoughts. Anyway, I get an email from a guy named Buster, and it was very nice. He said, I used to listen to you when you hosted podcasts for The Motley Fool, and I'm sitting here in the airport in Burlington, Vermont, and I was wondering if you were doing a podcast, so I searched on Apple Podcasts, and I found Money Unplugged. And he went on to say he was happy to have found the show and he was going to start listening to episodes. But he also said that he worked with some people who have a podcast about money, and he asked if I would ever be willing to be a guest on their show. So I did a little search, found the show. It's a legitimate money podcast. More importantly, it's a show that I thought I could be a guest on that show and I could not embarrass myself. I think I could do that. Because I had to check it out. I'm not just going to blindly say yes because I care about quality. And this looked like a show that was in my wheelhouse. The types of things they talk about, I can talk about that stuff. I feel like I could be a quality guest on that show. One time I got an email inviting me to be on a show, and they're like, hey, we want to talk to you about international monetary policy. And I was like, hey, I don't know how big you think my circle of competence is, but I promise you, it does not include that topic. So I write back to this guy, thank him for listening, thank him for the kind words, and I say, yes, I'd be happy to come on your coworker's show. And that was that, and I didn't really think much more about it until about a week later. I get another email from Buster, and this time he has CC'd 3 of his coworkers, and it's a long email. And he starts off by saying, if you'll indulge me, I want to give you some background information on my organization. And yes, Buster is his nickname. It turns out his real name is Dr. L.C. Evans. And he's the executive director of the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia, which has more than 500,000 members. There are about 160 employees at the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia, and among them is an investment team of, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 30, 35 people. And their responsibility is managing a pension fund that is worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $130 billion. And he goes on to write, we would like to fly you down here to Atlanta, have you record the podcast in our offices, have lunch with our investing team, and we would love it if you would do a presentation to our Wealth Builders Club, which is a group of about 60 to 70 employees who meet every month to talk about investing and financial literacy. And all of this was, to put it mildly, a surprise. A pleasant surprise, mind you, but still a surprise. Sometime after that, I got on a Zoom call with Buster and his colleagues, and we talked through what a day at their offices would be like. And they were all great, consummate professionals, and Buster was great at guiding the conversation, introducing everyone, making transitions as we went through different parts of the day, because one person on the call was the point person for the podcast. Another person was the point person for the Wealth Builders Club. And Buster kept things moving and made a couple of references to Money Unplugged. You know, this is a guy who has spent most of his life in Georgia and he works in Atlanta. So he was very happy that Clark Howard was a guest on the podcast. And he mentioned that on the call. He talked about the behind the scenes episode I did around Labor Day. And I talked about Clark Howard giving me a ride to the airport in Atlanta. And he got a good laugh out of that. So anyway, we worked through all the details. And I went to Atlanta last month, and it was great. I met up with Winston Buckley, who's the communications director. He was my point man for the podcast and generally got me from point A to point B throughout the day as we were going all over the building. I recorded the podcast. I had lunch with the investing team, which I'm not going to lie, I was a little nervous about because lunch was held in this big conference room. And the conference table was shaped like a giant horseshoe. And I was told to sit right in the center of the curve. So, you know, there's no hiding when you're sitting dead center. Everyone on the investing team introduced themselves and the industries that they cover. And then they started asking me questions. And look, I can talk with professional investors. I still follow the stock market headlines. There are certain industries I have a deeper understanding of. And fortunately, the topics never got so granular that I would have ended up looking like an idiot. Like it was really great. We talked about some specific companies and specific trends and that sort of thing. Fortunately, none of them asked me anything like, hey, what's your opinion of the gross margin compression that we're seeing in the biotech industry? That'd be like, oh God, no. So anyway, it was great. After lunch, it was time to make a presentation to the Wealth Builders Club. And the room this was held in was very similar to a college lecture hall that seats like 75 to 100 people. The rows of tables and chairs were tiered, and the podium was at the lowest level in the room. Before they introduced me, they started their meeting the way apparently they do every month. Up on the projection screen, they had a slide with the mission, vision, and goals of this group. And I took a picture so I can tell you what they are. The mission: we aim to empower employees through collaborative learning, informed decision-making, and the sharing of resources, enabling each employee to attain financial independence and long-term prosperity. Vision: equipping employees to navigate financial paths confidently, achieving their goals with clarity and purpose. And the goals are financial literacy, empowerment, long-term wealth building, networking, and collaboration. And then, kind of like when I was in grade school and we would start the day by saying the Pledge of Allegiance, on the next slide, they had a list of things that, as members of this club, they were committing themselves to. And they recited them out loud. And these are things like taking charge of their finances. Like these are things they're committing to. Taking charge of their finances, learning about money management and growth, setting clear goals, saving and investing to build lasting wealth. And I'm off to the side, and all I could think was, God, I wish there was more of this in the world. I wish there were more organizations, more companies, more entities that were putting resources to establishing opportunities like this for their employees. And I have to give a shout out to Sonia Kinling. She is the Director of Human Resources, and this group is her brainchild. I talked with her, and she said they started this group a year ago. And it's very impressive. And honestly, it's a blueprint of what organizations can do if they truly want to. So I get introduced. I did my hour-long presentation. I started to take questions after that, and we had set aside 30 minutes for questions. But with about 10 minutes to go, Buster Evans stood up and he said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut things a little short. Chris has a flight to catch, and we don't want him to miss it. And I had two thoughts at that point. And the first was, my flight isn't scheduled to take off for 3 hours, so I'm okay taking questions for 10 more minutes. But then my second thought was, this guy knows a heck of a lot more about traffic in Atlanta than I do, and I should just follow his lead. So I had my rolling suitcase, and I started making my way to the front of the building. And I did that thing where I was walking slowly with my right hand dragging the suitcase, and in my left hand, I had my phone, and I pull up the Uber app so I can get a car to take me to the airport. And I get outside the building, and Buster Evans is there with his car, and he reaches for my bag, and I'm fumbling with my phone, and I'm like, no, you don't have to do this. I'll just get an Uber. And he puts my bag in the back of his car, shuts the door, turns to me, and he has this big grin on his face, and he says, you think I'm going to let Clark Howard drive you to the airport and I'm not going to do the same? Come on. How am I going to refuse something like that? It was a memorable day for all the right reasons, and it makes me grateful that there are people like that who are just so committed to providing opportunities around such an important topic as money. So I'm grateful for people like that. And I'm grateful to you for listening to this show. We all have different amounts of money, but we all have the exact same number of hours in a week. And I appreciate, and I do not take for granted the fact that you decide to spend any amount of your waking hours listening to the conversations that I have with people on this show. One more thing, and I don't know how many episodes you've listened to, but one of the things I have recently noticed in the speed round at the end of these conversations, when I ask people about a charitable cause they like to support, everyone has a different answer, but there are two small themes that have popped up a couple of times. One is essentially, well, for lack of a better word, it's like bang for your buck. People picking an organization because they do a great job of getting the money to the targeted mission, or it's an organization where a small amount of money goes a long way. And the other is people talking about supporting their communities, making charitable donations locally. Not that there's anything wrong with national organizations, but a few different guests have talked about specifically wanting to support things in their local community. And when this occurred to me recently, I realized, oh, that's kind of how I approach charitable giving too. And I'll just mention one in particular, which is actually an organization in my hometown in Maine. And it ties into Thanksgiving because it's called the Waterville Area Soup Kitchen. And they serve meals during the week to people who need them. That's it. It's all volunteers. There's no paid staff. It started a few years ago, actually, and every year since it started, the Waterville Area Soup Kitchen has served more meals to more people in central Maine than it did the previous year. So, they know how to stretch a dollar. They make the most of the donations they receive. They're in my hometown. Doesn't get any more local than that. And it's all about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is, food. It's one of the basic human needs. And also, as Tina Fey said, the only real reward for anything is food. Yes, that's an actual quote from Tina Fey. The only real reward for anything is food. So on that note, I hope you have a delicious Thanksgiving. And if you happen to be listening to this after Thursday, then please follow the advice of the late, great Warren Zevon. Enjoy every sandwich. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.